My name is Sabrina Kinney. I'm 28 years old, and I'm writing this from the guest bedroom of my older sister's house, a room that smells faintly of lavender detergent and the lemon wood polish she uses on literally every surface she owns. 3 suitcases sit by the dresser. Everything I have left. Everything that fits into a life I thought I was building with someone else. Across town, the apartment I shared with my boyfriend Anthony Reyes sits in a half-furnished silence that feels like a ghost of who I used to be. 3 years together, 2.5 of them, steady, warm, safe, or at least I believe they were. Anthony and I met at a networking mixer for young professionals. I was working in digital design, he was in marketing, and somehow we ended up standing by the same platter of oversalted bruschetta, complaining about the lack of decent seating. We clicked easily. Conversation with him was always smooth, never forced. I remember thinking he felt like a warm room in winter, comfortable in a way that made me lower the edges of my guard. For a long time, we were good, better than good. We balanced each other. I was the quiet, methodical one. Anthony was the easygoing charmer who could talk a stone into telling its life story. We shared chores, finances, plans. We talked about dogs, about buying a townhouse one day, about maybe moving out of the city when we hit our 30s. It wasn't some fantasy whirlwind romance, it was practical, committed, real. Or so I thought. Everything shifted when Kayla Byron moved back into the city. I had heard stories about her Anthony's best friend from college, his platonic soulmate, the one who knew him better than anyone else. I didn't think much of it. I have male friends. Anthony has female friends. Adult relationships shouldn't crumble under the presence of other people. Trust is the foundation, right? But what Anthony described as harmless nostalgia turned into something else the moment Kayla re-entered his orbit. It started with late-night messages, memes, old inside jokes, long voice notes, sent at 11:45 p.m. on a Wednesday. Nothing inappropriate on paper, but edges of boundaries began to blur. Then the emergencies started. Kayla's flat tire, Kayla's terrible date, Kayla's existential crisis triggered by a bad haircut. Suddenly, our Friday movie nights were being interrupted because Kayla needed him. I tried to be patient. I didn't want to be that girlfriend, the one who polices friendships or counts how many times someone texts. But every time I tried to express discomfort, Anthony brushed me off with a smile and a kiss on the forehead. She's just adjusting to the city again, Bree. Don't overthink it. Overthinking is different from being blind. Over time, the boundaries dissolved even further. At group dinners, Kayla didn't sit on the opposite side of the table. She squeezed in beside Anthony, thigh pressed against his, sometimes leaning over him to show him something on her phone. If Anthony made a joke, Kayla laughed hard enough to lean into him. If I said something, she'd often respond with a neutral smile, like she was tolerating my presence, not sharing space with me. But the worst part wasn't her. It was how Anthony encouraged it. He liked the attention. He lit up around her in ways I hadn't seen since our early months together. He defended her, minimized her behavior, and told me I was reading into things. The first time I brought up my discomfort, I kept my tone light, almost joking. Does Kayla know personal space exists? She's very touchy. Anthony laughed like I had told him his tie was crooked. Oh my God, Sabrina, she's basically my sister. Don't be like that. But Kayla didn't treat him like a brother. And somewhere deep down, I suspected Anthony didn't truly see her that way either, not anymore. She started buying him gifts. Not small trinkets, thoughtful, expensive ones. A limited edition vinyl record from his favorite band. A custom leather-bound notebook he had admired once in a store window. Things that required attention money and emotional investment. When I finally confronted him about the notebook, his entire demeanor shifted. It's just a gift. Why are you being weird about it, Sabrina? You're acting insecure. It's not attractive. That word stuck to me like a thorn. Insecure. As if wanting respect was pettiness. As if noticing someone pushing boundaries meant something was wrong with me. That word became his shield. Every concern I voiced became another example of my overreacting. Every discomfort I expressed was framed as jealousy. His dismissals didn't just sting, they accumulated layering, quietly over months, until I felt like a piece of furniture in my own relationship, something meant to blend in and not make noise. Then came the Austin trip. It was supposed to be a group festival weekend. 4 of them had booked hotel rooms months in advance. Anthony, Kayla, their friends Sarah and Leo. But 2 days before the trip, Sarah canceled. Then Leo backed out because of a work crisis. Suddenly, it was just Anthony and Kayla heading out of town together. I watched him pack at our kitchen island folding shirts with a casual enthusiasm that felt infuriatingly careless. I waited for him to acknowledge the obvious tension in the situation. He didn't. So, now that it's just you two, I said carefully, are you getting separate rooms or? He didn't even look up. We're keeping the original hotel room. It's too late to get a refund. The words hit like a cold hand on the back of my neck. I'm not comfortable with that, I said. Sharing a room with another woman, especially one who buys you gifts and texts you every night, that's not okay with me. He finally looked at me then, but there was no warmth in his eyes, just irritation. Kayla doesn't have feelings for me, Sabrina. You're projecting your insecurity onto her. This is pathetic. Pathetic. Another word I hadn't earned. I took a breath, steadying my voice. If the roles were reversed, if I shared a hotel room with a guy who clearly adored me, you'd lose your mind. That's different, he snapped. And honestly, I'm tired of walking on eggshells because you don't trust my friends. He grabbed a bottle of water, leaned on the counter, and delivered the line that ended us. If my girlfriends make you insecure, Sabrina, that's your problem, not mine. He said it casually, dismissively, as if he were commenting on the weather, a shrug of the soul. In that moment, something inside me didn't explode. It shut off. Quietly. Cleanly. The grief vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity that felt like stepping underwater and realizing the ocean was calmer than the storm on the shore. You're right, I said softly. He blinked, caught off guard by how easily I agreed. What? You're absolutely right, I repeated. It's my problem. He smirked like he'd won. Like the argument was over, like the case had closed in his favor. Good, I'm glad you finally see that. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw that he expected me to apologize, to shrink, to soothe his ego, that I would accept his priorities, that I would stay small. But I didn't say another word. Internally, a door clicked shut. I had 72 hours before he returned, and that was more than enough. Anthony left for the airport at 5:00 a.m. on Friday. He kissed my cheek as I pretended to sleep, the way someone kisses a pet before leaving for work, an automatic gesture with no thought behind it. I listened to the soft thud of his suitcase wheels, the muffled clatter of keys, the click of the front door, and finally, the fading hum of the rideshare pulling away from the curb. The silence that followed was thick and absolute. It filled the apartment, the hallways, my lungs. I lay there for a good minute, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a feeling, sadness, panic, heartbreak. But what I felt instead was a strange, steady quiet inside me. Not numbness, not rage, something closer to certainty, a clarity I had been missing for months. I sat up, pushed my hair out of my face, and looked around the bedroom. His side of the closet gaped open, a neat row of shirts. He insisted on color coordinating. My side looked the same as it always did, but suddenly everything felt temporary, like a hotel room after checkout time. I stood, rolled my shoulders back, and began. I didn't pack with anger. I wasn't slamming drawers, throwing clothes, or crying. If I had done any of that, it would have meant I still wanted him to understand me, that I still believed he might care. Instead, I packed the way someone evacuates a building they already know is burning. Methodically, quietly, without hesitation. Suitcase 1, work clothes, dresses, sweaters. Suitcase 2, casual wear gym leggings, sleep shirts. Suitcase 3, toiletries, shoes, the jewelry I had bought for myself, because Anthony didn't believe in wasting money on metal. By 7:30 a.m., the room looked wrong. The bed stripped of my blankets, and the pillows I'd chosen looked exposed. Vulnerable. The nightstand I had decorated with tiny framed photos now held nothing. My toothbrush was gone from the bathroom. My perfume bottles no longer sat in their neat row by the mirror. A house becomes foreign quickly when the pieces of your presence begin to vanish. Next came the living room. The 65-inch TV mine. The soundbar mine. The espresso machine Anthony depended on every morning, but never learned to clean. Also mine. I unplugged it carefully, wrapping the cord the way the manual had shown. I boxed the items quietly, lining them up by the door with a precision that made my hands feel steadier than they had in months. I didn't touch his belongings. Not a single hoodie, not a single sneaker, not a single piece of furniture he had bought. That was the point. If I wanted chaos, I could have flipped the apartment upside down. If I wanted revenge, I could have left him with nothing but a note carved into the wall. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted absence. Absence is louder. At 8:00 a.m., I called my sister. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick from sleep. Sabrina. Did something happen? I need to borrow your SUV, I said. And probably your guest room, for a little while. There was a pause, but she didn't ask questions. Text me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. That's the thing about sisters, they recognize the tone that means the world has just snapped in half. When she arrived, hair still damp from a rushed shower, she didn't hug me or ask what he did. She simply looked around the apartment and let out a slow exhale. Okay, she said softly. Tell me what to grab. We worked together in silence, the kind of silence only two people with the same blood understand. She took boxes to the car. I disassembled the TV mount. She wrapped my framed prints in towels. I emptied the bookshelf of the novels Anthony always teased me for rereading. By noon, the apartment had lost its identity. It wasn't ours anymore, and it certainly wasn't mine. It looked like a place I had rented for a weekend and decided not to stay in. I walked to the kitchen counter and pulled out the lease agreement. We had been month to month for almost a year. I wrote a formal notice to vacate dated. It signed it and paper-clipped a check for next month's rent my half. If Anthony wanted a conversation, I had already ensured I wouldn't owe him a thing. I left the envelope beside the salt shaker. Then I reached for the notepad and a Sharpie. For a moment I hovered. I could write something. A letter, a justification, a goodbye, an explanation of all the invisible cuts he had inflicted without ever lifting a hand. Something that would make him understand, finally, the lines he crossed. I imagined the words forming I deserved better. You didn't lose me, you let me go. I wasn't insecure, I was unheard. But then I remembered his smirk in the kitchen, that smug certainty, that dismissal. If I left a note, I would still be trying to reach him, and he had made it clear that my feelings were my problem, so I kept the Sharpie. And the notepad. No message, no closure, just silence. Silence is impossible to argue with. Before leaving, I did one last sweep of the apartment. I checked the drawers, the bathroom cabinet, the laundry room under the bed. I took nothing that wasn't mine. I left nothing that might become an excuse for him to call me and demand a conversation. When I finished, I placed my key on the kitchen island right beside the rent check and walked toward the door. My sister was waiting in the hallway, one hand on her hip, concern etched across her face. You okay? She asked. I looked at the darkened apartment behind me. I thought about the 3 years I had poured into someone who didn't blink before invalidating me. I thought about the hotel room he planned to share with another woman, and the casual cruelty in his voice when he told me my feelings were pathetic. I'm okay, I said finally. I pulled the door closed. I didn't lock it. I didn't have a key anymore. We drove to my sister's house in silence. Not the kind that hurt, the kind that let me breathe. By late afternoon, everything I owned was in her guest room, stacked neatly against the wall. I took a shower, washed the day's sweat and exhaustion off my skin, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my silent phone. It didn't take long. At 7:14 p.m., my screen lit up. Anthony, babe. I'm home. Why does the living room look empty? 7:15 p.m. Did we get robbed? Where's the TV? Where's the espresso machine? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then another message. Why is your key on the counter, Sabrina? Answer your phone. This isn't funny. I didn't reply. I set the phone face down. At 7:22 p.m., it buzzed again. Pick up. You're being ridiculous. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel guilt. I felt distance, wide, clean distance, stretching between the life I had and the one I was reclaiming. Each new message was proof I had done the right thing. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He wasn't expressing concern or self-reflection. He was angry the furniture was gone. That told me everything. At 8:03 p.m., as another string of messages came in, I turned the phone to Do Not Disturb. And for the first time in months, I felt my chest loosen. I wasn't running from him. I was returning to myself. The first 2 days after I left felt strangely peaceful. Quiet mornings, coffee on my sister Diana's patio, the hum of traffic in the distance. I hadn't realized how exhausted I'd been until the weight lifted. Silence felt like oxygen, not emptiness. But the silence didn't last. By Monday morning, Anthony's confusion had fermented into panic. When I finally checked my notifications after turning off Do Not Disturb for a moment, my lock screen was filled with missed calls and messages stacked on top of each other like frantic post-its from a person drowning. Anthony, 8:16 a.m. Sabrina. Please answer, 8:45 a.m. Can we just talk like adults? 9:30 a.m. I called your job. They said you took personal leave. Are you okay? 10:12 a.m. This is insane. You can't just abandon someone without a conversation. 11:03 a.m. You owe me an explanation. He used the word owe like I was a debtor who'd skipped out on rent. I scrolled expressionless. For months, he had insisted my emotions were my problem alone. Now that my absence inconvenienced him suddenly, my emotions mattered. Suddenly, I was supposed to return, soothe him, reassure him, justify myself. Silence, however, has a discipline to it. Once you taste its clarity, it becomes easier to commit to. I didn't respond. I didn't unblock him. I didn't send a single emoji. By Tuesday, the tone shifted again. It always does when control is slipping. His messages went from pleading to sharp. Anthony, 7:48 a.m. I can't afford this place alone. 7:49 a.m. You know that. 8:10 a.m. Are you really going to leave me drowning? 8:46 a.m. So what, you want me evicted? Is that your goal? I almost laughed. Not because eviction was funny, but because his assumption was telling. He believed deeply instinctively that I should be responsible for his comfort, that I was obligated to fill whatever gap he felt in his life. It didn't occur to him to ask Kayla for help. Interesting. Telling. I muted the thread again. By Wednesday, I blocked his number not out of anger, but out of boredom. His texts had become predictable, looping through guilt, blame, charm, and panic like a broken carousel. Blocking him felt like closing a book I had already read too many times. But blocking him didn't block the rumors. Mutual friends started reaching out, each with hesitant voices carrying the same message beneath different wording. What happened between you and Anthony? Or he says you ghosted him without warning. Or did you really leave because of Kayla? His story spread fast. According to Anthony, I had stormed out lost, it acted jealous, and overreacted to a harmless friendship. Apparently I was unstable. Apparently I was controlling. Apparently I sabotaged the relationship out of insecurity. He crafted a narrative where he was the wounded, confused boyfriend, blindsided by a dramatic girlfriend who couldn't handle his female friends. The people who believed him weren't surprising. They were the ones who always found Kayla sweet and Anthony charming. People who think charisma equates to truth. But not everyone bought it. Some mutual friends were politely neutral. Others, especially those who knew Kayla's reputation for blurred boundaries, treaded carefully. Still, the whispers were exhausting. And then came the flying monkey. That's what Diana called him, Jordan, Anthony's childhood friend. The one who always half suspected I was too serious for Anthony and insisted he needed people like Kayla to balance him out. Jordan called me on Thursday evening. I recognized the number. I answered anyway. Sabrina, he said, exhaling sharply like he had run up a flight of stairs just to scold me. I can't believe you're doing this. Doing what I asked, placing my phone on speaker while I chopped vegetables for dinner. Punishing Anthony. Ghosting him. Leaving him with the rent. It's cruel, Sabrina. It's actually sociopathic. Sociopathic, I repeated slowly the word, almost amusing. That's a strong diagnosis. Don't make jokes, he snapped. He's a wreck. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. You need to talk to him. That sounds like something his best friend should help with, I said calmly. You're deflecting, Jordan hissed. Kayla told me everything. You freaked out because they went on a trip that was planned months ago. I stopped cutting and froze not because of the accusation, but because of who he said told him the story. Kayla told you everything, I echoed. Yeah, he said proudly, as if he'd just revealed a star witness at a trial. She said nothing happened. They didn't even sleep in the same bed. Anthony slept on the floor. You blew up the relationship for nothing. I smoothed the edge of the cutting board and let a long silence hang before responding. Jordan, I have a question, I said. Would you be okay with your girlfriend sharing a hotel room with a guy who buys her gifts, texts her, at midnight, leans on her at bars, and deletes their conversation threads? Another pause. He didn't answer. And if you told her it made you uncomfortable, I continued, would you expect her to belittle you? Tell you that your feelings were pathetic? That's not what happened, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction now. Really? What did Kayla tell you Anthony said to me before he left for Austin? More silence, the kind that cracks something open. I took a slow breath. He looked me in the eye and said, if my girlfriends make you insecure, Sabrina, that's your problem. He made it clear my feelings didn't matter, so I removed myself. I solved the problem. That's twisting it, he said weakly. No, I replied. It's implementing it. Jordan didn't respond for several seconds. I could hear him breathing, hear the distant sound of traffic behind him. He finally spoke again, but this time the arrogance had drained. Look, he said, sounding tired instead of angry. Anthony's in a bad spot. Kayla isn't helping. She's distant. Of course she was. Kayla didn't want Anthony. She wanted attention, novelty, emotional intimacy, without responsibility. Anthony was fun to flirt with when he belonged to someone else. Now that he was available, the game was over. She's been busy, Jordan muttered. She's hardly answered his calls since they got back. I closed my eyes briefly. So that was the truth. Anthony was falling apart because the safety net he assumed would catch him had already moved on. Tell him, I said, my voice firm and steady, that the woman he prioritized can help him now. He chose her. Let her co-sign his lease. Let her buy him gifts. Let her sit beside him in the booth. Jordan inhaled sharply. That's cold, Sabrina. No, I said. It's clarity. I hung up before he could say anything else. After that call, I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something quieter, more grounded. This was never a fight between me and Kayla. It was a fight between the version of myself I had been forced to become and the version I was reclaiming. Over the next 2 weeks, my life settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. I worked. I slept well. I ate without a knot in my stomach. I stopped checking Anthony's texts because there were none to check, not after I blocked him. My bank account grew without the constant leak of small apologies disguised as date nights and gifts. I thought the worst was over. But people like Anthony don't let their narrative collapse quietly. 3 weeks after I left, the confrontation arrived. Loud, unexpected, public. A moment that would end everything for good. 3 weeks after I left Anthony, I thought the storm had finally passed. My days had settled into a quiet rhythm, morning coffee with my sister Diana evening, walks around her neighborhood, a sense of calm slowly knitting itself back into my bones. I felt human again. Then came the Saturday of Diana's family barbecue. It started as a warm, easy day. Her backyard smelled of grilled corn and charcoal. Kids ran around, chasing each other with water guns. Cousins I hadn't seen in months hugged me, teasing me for being the mysterious sister who disappeared into work. No one asked about Anthony. They knew better, or perhaps they could feel from the way I carried myself now that I was better off without him. I had taken over the grill tongs in one hand, lemonade in the other, enjoying the rhythmic sizzle of burgers. Every so often, Diana would glance at me with that soft, proud look she gets when she knows I've survived something hard. Around 3:00 p.m., sunlight shimmered off the grill hood. Music played low from a speaker on the patio. I remember thinking briefly that this moment felt like the first real chapter of my life after Anthony. Then I heard it, the sharp screech of tires cutting too fast into the driveway. People stopped talking. Kids froze mid-run. Even the music seemed to quiet itself. A beat later, the slamming of a car door echoed through the yard. I knew who it was before I turned. Anthony stood at the edge of the grass chest, heaving eyes wild. He looked thinner, like he'd lost weight quickly. His hair was unkempt, his t-shirt wrinkled, his entire posture vibrating with frantic energy. The confident, easygoing charm he always relied on was gone. In its place was something raw and desperate. When his eyes locked onto mine, something inside him snapped visibly. "You," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think you can just hide here?" Every conversation halted. Adults straightened. Children were ushered toward the porch. The kind of silence that comes before a crash settled over the lawn. I set down the tongs carefully. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I wiped my hands on a towel, inhaled once, and stepped off the patio toward him. Diana rose from her seat immediately, but I held up a hand. I needed to do this myself. Anthony stormed forward, several steps close enough that I could see the dark circles beneath his eyes. His voice broke as he spoke. "You left," he said, his breath shaking. "You just left Sabrina. No conversation, no explanation. 3 years together and you vanished like I'm nothing." His anger wasn't loud. It was frantic, unraveling. The kind of anger people feel when they realize the audience to their performance has stopped clapping. "Anthony," I said calmly, keeping my voice low but firm, "you need to step back and breathe." "No," he snapped. "I'm not stepping back. I'm not calming down. You owe me a conversation. You can't just abandon someone because you're jealous of a friend." There it was again, his favorite word. Jealous. He flung it like a weapon, as if naming me, the problem, would make it true. "You keep telling everyone I abandoned you," I said. "But the truth is, I listened to you." He blinked, thrown off for a moment. "What are you talking about?" I took one step closer, not aggressive, just grounded enough that he had to look at me directly. "That night before the trip, I said you told me exactly where I stood. You told me my feelings were pathetic, that my discomfort with you sharing a hotel room with another woman was my problem, not yours." "That's not," he began. I raised a hand slightly. "You said, if my girlfriends make you insecure, Sabrina, that's your problem." And I believed you. I took your words seriously. You didn't want my feelings to be part of your life, so I removed myself from it. The crowd behind me was silent. Even the neighbor's dog had stopped barking. Anthony's jaw clenched, the pulse in his temple twitching. It was one weekend, he choked. Nothing happened. Kayla slept on the couch. I stayed in the bed alone. I didn't cheat on you, Sabrina. His desperation cracked something inside his voice. He sounded like a man pleading with a judge he thought he could charm. It wasn't about cheating, I said quietly. It was about respect. He shook his head violently. Kayla was just a friend. You imagined everything. You pushed me away. Did I asked softly, or did you make room for someone else long before I left? He looked away, jaw tightening. I continued. You defended her every time she crossed a line. You excused her gifts, the constant messages, the way she touched you like she owned you. You treated my concerns like inconveniences. You told me my boundaries were insecurities. What was I supposed to do? Shrink myself to fit your comfort. His eyes glistened. He stepped forward again, voice dropping to a wounded pleading. Sabrina, I need you. My rent doubled without you, Kayla. His voice cracked. She's not helping. She's been avoiding me since the trip. Ah, there it was. Kayla had disappeared the moment Anthony became available. I tilted my head. Where is she today? I asked. Your best friend. The woman who occupied your nights, your attention, your affection. The one you defended to the point of losing me. Where is Kayla now that you need her? His face crumpled, shame creeping in. She's busy, he whispered. She's gone, I corrected gently. Not because of me, but because she never wanted you. She wanted the game, the attention, the emotional intimacy without responsibility. He swallowed hard. I made a mistake, he said, voice trembling. I know that now. I didn't think you would actually leave. I didn't think you'd ever stand up for myself, I finished. Value my own boundaries. Walk away when you refuse to. His silence was his answer. Sabrina, he begged, stepping toward me. I can change. I'll fix everything. I'll block Kayla. I'll do whatever you want. Just come home, please. He reached out, fingers brushing the air between us, aiming for my arm. I took a single step back. I accept your apology, Anthony, I said gently. But I don't accept you. His face twisted. You can't just leave me like this, he snapped, anger returning as quickly as it had vanished. You don't get to walk away after everything we built. I turned slightly, looking toward the porch where my sister stood ready. You had a choice, I said quietly. You chose her attention over my respect. You chose to ignore my boundaries. Now you're living with that choice. His breathing quickened. You can't do this to me. I didn't do anything to you, I replied. You told me my feelings were my problem. So I solved the problem. He stared at me stunned, as if he'd been punched by the very words he once used so casually. I'm done, Anthony, I said softly, the finality wrapping around the lawn like cool air. You can keep your friends. I'm keeping my peace. I turned and walked toward the porch. Behind me, his voice broke into a hoarse scream. Sabrina, you can't just walk away. I didn't look back. Diana stepped beside me, crossing her arms. Do you want me to call the police? She asked, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Give him 2 minutes, I said, and then yes. I went inside, closed the sliding door, and let the murmur of concerned voices fade behind me. A minute of shouting, then silence. Then the slamming of a car door and the screeching of tires fading down the street. I poured myself a fresh drink, sat at the counter, and felt the last knot in my chest finally unwind. It was over, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. 8 months have passed since that afternoon in Diana's yard, the day Anthony shattered in front of strangers, and the day I realized I was finally done carrying the weight of his denial. 8 months of rebuilding a life I didn't realize had been slowly eroding under the constant drip of disrespect. My world now is quieter, but not the empty kind of quiet, the peaceful kind. The kind you get in a library or during the hour just before sunrise when the sky is pale and hopeful and the day hasn't had time to bruise you yet. After a month at Diana's, I bought my own place, not a rental mine. A 2-bedroom house with a small backyard and a garage I turned into a studio for my design work. I painted the walls warm taupe, hung up the framed prints Anthony used to mock, and added plants I actually remember to water. Every corner of the house feels like a sentence in a story I finally get to write alone. There are no ghosts here, no echoes of arguments, no text notifications that make my stomach twist. Just space, clean, warm space. Work has flourished too. Without the constant emotional static of worrying who Anthony was messaging, where Kayla was dragging his attention, or whether he'd accuse me of insecurity again, I suddenly had energy I forgot I possessed. I started staying focused. I earned a promotion. My boss said I seemed clearer, and for the first time, I believed someone was genuinely seeing me. As for Anthony, I haven't spoken to him since that day. He tried reaching out indirectly through mutual friends, anonymous numbers, social media accounts he probably made in a hurry. But everything bounced off a wall I no longer felt the need to explain. Diana once told me he tried friending her on Facebook just to get updates on me. She blocked him instantly and sent me a screenshot with the caption, "He's persistent. Too bad I'm meaner." Mutual friends shared bits of gossip over time, the kind people can't help whispering about when a breakup is messy enough. Apparently, Anthony's story about me being unstable didn't age well. People noticed how he spiraled, how Kayla vanished when he finally needed her, how he unraveled the moment accountability showed up at his door. People aren't stupid, they connect dots. And the dots formed a picture. A man who minimized my boundaries. A man who relied on attention he hadn't earned. A man who didn't realize leaving was always an option until I took it. The last I heard, he was dating a bartender he met downtown. Someone who, according to friends, had a very active social life and lots of guy friends. The irony wasn't lost on me. The universe has a dark sense of humor. But I don't wish him pain. I don't wish him anything at all. Indifference is the cleanest kind of closure. Recently, though, something unexpected entered my life. His name is Daniel. We met at a design workshop I was hosting. He was in the back row taking notes even when no one else was. A quiet listener, the kind of man who speaks thoughtfully, not loudly. We crossed paths again at a networking mixer 2 weeks later, and he asked if he could buy me coffee. Only if you have time, he added. Which struck me, because Anthony never once asked if I had time. He assumed I did. Daniel doesn't assume. On our third date, his phone buzzed mid-conversation. He glanced at it, rolled his eyes, and flipped it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked, old reflexes tightening for a split second. "Yeah," he said. "Just my ex trying to start drama again. He's blocked, but he tries from new numbers sometimes." "Do you need to take the call?" He looked at me with genuine confusion, the kind that says he grew up in a different emotional world. "Why would I interrupt a date with you to answer him?" he asked. "That would be disrespectful." I didn't say anything at first. I was too busy absorbing the simple, startling truth in his tone, the effortless respect. For months after Anthony, I told myself I wasn't ready to date. I told myself I needed time. I told myself I needed to heal. But sitting across from Daniel that night, hearing him speak with boundaries, instead of defensiveness, with clarity, instead of accusation, with warmth, instead of arrogance, I realized healing had already happened. It happened the night I packed those suitcases. It happened the moment I walked away. It happened when I chose peace over proximity. The world didn't end when I left Anthony. It began. Looking back, insecurity was never my flaw. It was an alarm system, a signal that something was deeply wrong. I wasn't jealous of Kayla, I was observant. I wasn't overreacting, I was being continuously invalidated. When someone tells you your feelings are your problem, believe them. Then solve the problem, even if the solution is leaving. If you, the one watching this, feel unseen or unheard in your relationship, if your boundaries are dismissed, if your discomfort is belittled, if someone tells you you're insecure when you're simply trying to be respected, listen to your instincts. You're not weak, you're not dramatic, you're not crazy. You might just be waking up. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to hear more stories like this. And if you've ever walked away from someone who refused to hear you tell your story in the comments, someone out there needs to hear it.